He showed up to his brother's wedding with a woman carrying another man's child, a man he had just killed. She didn't know yet, but the bride's father did, and he was about to make his move. Now the mafia boss must decide whether to tell her the brutal truth and risk losing her trust forever, or keep the secret and drag her into a blood feud where her unborn baby becomes a target for revenge. The music in the banquet hall was soft and sweet, but the air felt sharp enough to cut skin. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light over white roses, gold chairs, and 100 smiling faces that did not dare show what they truly felt. At the center of it all stood Corrado Bellini, the man everyone feared, dressed in a black suit that looked more like armor than fabric. His jaw was tight, his eyes restless, scanning every shadow as if expecting a bullet to crawl out of the dark. Then the doors opened. Beside him walked a pregnant woman in a simple navy dress, her belly round, her steps careful, one hand resting protectively over the child inside her. Her name was Mariah Cole, and her smile trembled like glass about to break. She had no idea that the father of her baby was dead. She had no idea the man at her side had pulled the trigger. All eyes followed them down the aisle. At the front table, the bride's father, Enzo Morelli, did not clap. His jaw clenched, his fingers curled around a crystal glass, and his gaze locked on the swell of Mariah's stomach like it was a loaded gun pointed at his family's name. Tonight was supposed to be a wedding. Instead, it was the opening shot of a quiet war. "Hello, beautiful family. My daughter challenged me to hit 1,000 subscribers, so now you're all involved. Let's show her that nothing is impossible with a family behind you. Subscribe and comment below with where you're watching from. I want to know, because seeing all your locations reminds me that stories connect us all, no matter the distance." Let's continue. The rain came down cold and angry, turning the alley into a slick black mirror that reflected nothing but darkness. Corrado Bellini stood in the center of it, his hand still warm from the gun he had just fired. The man at his feet was choking on his own blood, fingers clawing at the wet pavement like he could dig his way out of death. His name was Damon Hirst, and he had betrayed the Bellini family. He had stolen money, fed secrets to rivals, and thought he was clever enough to disappear before anyone noticed. He was wrong. Corrado watched him die without blinking. He had done this before, too many times, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the air smelled like copper and regret, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that this kill would cost him more than the others. He ignored it. Control meant making hard choices. Control meant survival. Damon's body went still. The rain washed the blood toward the gutter, mixing it with motor oil and trash. Corrado turned to leave, but then he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it. A breath. A whimper. Something human hiding in the shadows. He pulled his gun again and moved toward the dumpster at the far end of the alley. His shoes splashed through puddles, the noise sharp in the silence. When he rounded the corner, he found her. A woman, pregnant, crouched behind rusted metal with her arms wrapped around her belly like she could shield the baby from what she had just seen. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Corrado's chest tightened. He had not expected this. He lowered the gun, but did not put it away. "You saw," he said. It was not a question. She nodded, unable to speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked at Damon's body, then back at Corrado, and something broke inside her. A sob tore from her throat, raw and desperate. "You killed him," she whispered. "You killed him." Corrado did not answer. He studied her instead. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair plastered to her face and a cheap coat soaked through. Her hands trembled as they pressed against her stomach, and he could see the curve of life beneath the fabric. 7 months, maybe more. His mind moved fast, calculating risks, weighing options. She was a witness. She was a problem. She was also pregnant and alone in an alley with a dead man and a killer. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Mariah," she said, choking on the word. "Mariah Cole. I was." She looked at Damon again and closed her eyes. "He's the father." Corrado's jaw tightened. Of course he was. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. He had just killed the father of an unborn child, and now the mother was staring at him like he was the devil himself. Maybe he was. "Get up," he said. She did not move. Her body was frozen, locked in place by shock and fear. Corrado stepped closer, and she flinched. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, though he was not sure she believed him. He was not sure he believed himself. "But you can't stay here. The police will come. Other people will come. You don't want to be here when they do." "I don't care," she whispered. I don't care anymore. Corrado crouched down in front of her, his eyes level with hers. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the kind that came from months of carrying weight no one else could see. You should care, he said quietly. You're carrying a life. That baby didn't choose this. But you can still choose what happens next. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She hated him. He could see it, but she also knew he was right. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. Nothing, he said. Yet. He stood and offered her his hand. She stared at it like it was a trap. Maybe it was. But after a long, agonizing moment, she took it. Her fingers were cold and small in his. And when he pulled her to her feet, she swayed, unsteady. He caught her by the elbow, steadying her. And she looked up at him with eyes full of questions she was too afraid to ask. Go home, he said. Lock your door. Don't talk to anyone. I'll find you when it's time. Time for what? She whispered. He did not answer. He just let her go, watching as she stumbled toward the mouth of the alley, one hand on her belly, the other braced against the wall. She looked back once, her face a mask of grief and confusion, and then she was gone. Corrado stood alone in the rain, the body at his feet, and the weight of a choice pressing down on his chest. He had just saved her life, or ruined it. He was not sure which, but he knew one thing. He would see her again. The hospital smelled like bleach and bad decisions. Corrado walked through the automatic doors with his hands in his pockets, his face calm, his mind sharp. He had not slept in 2 days. After the alley, after Damon, after Mariah, he had spent every hour cleaning up the mess, paying off the right people, making sure the body disappeared and the questions never started. But he could not stop thinking about her, the pregnant woman with terror in her eyes. He found her room on the 3rd floor. The nurse at the desk did not ask questions. People rarely did when Corrado Bellini walked into a building. He moved quietly down the hall until he reached her door. It was cracked open. He pushed it wider and stepped inside. Mariah was lying in the narrow bed, her face turned toward the window. An IV dripped into her arm. Her hand rested on her belly, fingers spread protectively over the curve. When the door clicked shut behind him, she turned her head slowly. Her eyes widened. You, she breathed. Me, Corrado said. She sat up fast, too fast, and winced. Her hand flew to her stomach, and Corrado moved without thinking, crossing the room in 3 steps. Don't. You'll hurt yourself. Stay away from me, she hissed, but her voice shook. He stopped a few feet from the bed, hands raised slightly. I'm not here to hurt you, Mariah. You killed him, she said, her voice breaking. You killed Damon, and now you're here. Why? To finish what you started? Corrado's jaw tightened. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. The words landed hard. She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then what do you want? He studied her for a long moment. He needed her. Not because she was a witness, but because his brother's wedding was in 5 days, and showing up with a pregnant woman on his arm would send a message to every family in the city. It would show strength, control, a future. I have a proposition, he said. She laughed bitterly. Of course you do. My brother is getting married, Corrado continued. I need a date, someone who makes a statement. Mariah stared at him like he had lost his mind. You want me to go to a wedding with you? The man who murdered my baby's father? Yes. You're insane. Maybe, he said, but you're still listening. She shook her head, wiping her eyes. Why me? Because you're pregnant, he said simply. And because you need help. Her eyes flashed with anger. I don't need anything from you. You collapsed, Corrado said, his voice low. The doctors said you're malnourished. You haven't been eating. You're 7 months pregnant, alone, and scared. Damon wasn't taking care of you, was he? She looked away, her jaw tight. That was answer enough. Corrado took a step closer. I'll pay for everything. Medical bills, food, a safe place to stay. All you have to do is stand beside me for 1 night. Smile. After that, you're free. Free, she repeated, her voice hollow. You think I'll ever be free after what I saw? He did not answer. They both knew the truth. Mariah closed her eyes, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly. She was thinking, calculating, surviving. How much? She asked finally. 50,000. Her eyes snapped open. What? $50,000. Cash. After the wedding. You take it. Disappear. Start over. Raise your baby in peace. She searched his face, looking for the lie. Why would you do that? Because I need you, he said honestly. And because that baby deserves better than this. Mariah's breath hitched. She looked down at her stomach, and something broke in her expression. Fear, hope, desperation. If I say yes, what happens to me? What if someone finds out I saw what you did? Corrado leaned closer, his voice dropping to a deadly promise. No one will touch you. Not while you're with me. She wanted to believe him. He could see it. But trust was a luxury she could not afford. And after the wedding, you walk away. I keep my word. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. Mariah looked at him one more time, and then she nodded. Just once. Barely. Okay, she said. One night. Then I'm gone. Corrado felt something tighten in his chest. Relief. Maybe. Or something darker. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card with a number written on the back. He set it on the table beside her bed. Someone will pick you up in 3 days. Be ready. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Corrado. He looked back. If you're lying to me, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I'll make sure the whole world knows what you did. He almost smiled. I believe you. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with her fear, her baby, and a choice that would change everything. Outside the hospital, rain began to fall again, and Corrado stood under the awning, staring at the city lights bleeding through the storm. He had made a deal. He had pulled her deeper into his world, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if saving her life meant destroying it in a different way. But it was too late now. The wedding was in 3 days, and Mariah Cole, whether she knew it or not, had just become the most dangerous piece on the board. The church was older than most of the people inside it, built from white marble that caught the afternoon light and threw it back like a challenge. Mariah stood at the entrance, one hand pressed against her stomach, the other clutching a small purse that felt too delicate for what was about to happen. Her navy dress was simple, borrowed from a boutique Corrado's people had sent her to 3 days ago. It fit her perfectly, hugging the curve of her belly without hiding it. That was the point, she knew. She was supposed to be seen. Corrado appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. He wore a black suit that looked expensive enough to buy a house, his hair slicked back, his expression unreadable. When he offered his arm, she hesitated. Taking it felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. But she had already made the deal, already sold herself for $50,000 and a promise of safety. So she slipped her hand through the crook of his elbow and let him lead her inside. The doors opened, and the world changed. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. The church was filled with people dressed in silk and expensive cologne, their faces painted with polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. White roses lined the aisle, their petals too perfect, too pale, like they had been drained of blood. Candles flickered in tall holders, casting shadows that moved like living things. At the front, near the altar, stood a younger man who looked like Corrado but softer, kinder. His brother, Matteo, the groom. Beside him stood the bride, a beautiful woman with dark hair and a veil that covered half her face. But Mariah barely noticed them, because sitting in the front row, staring directly at her with cold, calculating eyes, was an older man in a gray suit. His jaw was square, his hair silver, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He did not smile. He did not blink. He just watched her belly like it was a bomb about to go off. That's Enzo Morelli, Corrado murmured in her ear, his voice low and steady. The bride's father. Don't look at him. Don't react. Just walk. Mariah's heart hammered in her chest. She forced her legs to move, one step after another, her heels clicking against the stone floor. Every eye followed her. Every whisper grew louder. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their suspicion. Who was she? Why was she here? What did she mean to Corrado Bellini? She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But Corrado's hand covered hers, firm and warm, anchoring her to the moment. Breathe, he said softly. You're doing fine. They reached the third row, and Corrado guided her into a seat near the aisle. He sat beside her, his body angled slightly toward hers, protective, possessive. The ceremony began, but Mariah could not focus on the vows or the prayers. All she could feel was Enzo's gaze burning into her from across the aisle. All she could think about was the man sitting beside her, the killer who had promised to keep her safe. The priest spoke in Latin, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The bride and groom exchanged rings. Matteo kissed his new wife. and the crowd erupted into polite applause. Mariah clapped too, her hands shaking, her smile brittle. Corrado leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. "Almost over," he whispered. "You're doing well." But it was not almost over. It was just beginning. As the bride and groom walked back down the aisle, Enzo Morelli rose from his seat. His eyes locked onto Mariah, and he moved toward her with the slow, deliberate steps of a predator. Corrado stiffened beside her, his hand sliding to the small of her back. "Stay calm," he said quietly. "Let me handle this." Enzo stopped in front of them, his smile thin and dangerous. "Corrado," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I didn't know you were bringing a guest." "Last-minute decision," Corrado replied, his tone cold. Enzo's gaze dropped to Mariah's belly, lingering there for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Congratulations," he said, though the word sounded like a threat. "When are you due?" Mariah's throat went dry. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Corrado answered for her. 2 months. Enzo's smile widened. "How wonderful. A new life. Such a fragile thing, isn't it?" He looked at Corrado, and something dark passed between them. "I hope nothing happens to ruin it." Corrado's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Nothing will." Enzo chuckled softly, then turned his attention back to Mariah. "What's your name, dear?" She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "Mariah, Mariah," he repeated, tasting the word. "Beautiful. Tell me, Mariah, how did you meet Corrado?" Her mind went blank. She had no answer prepared, no story rehearsed. Panic clawed at her throat. But before she could stumble through a lie, Corrado spoke. "She's a nurse. We met through mutual friends." Enzo raised an eyebrow. "A nurse. How noble." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper only they could hear. "Be careful, Mariah. The company you keep can be dangerous, especially for someone in your condition." Mariah's blood ran cold. She did not know what to say, what to do. But Corrado stood, placing himself between her and Enzo. "We should get to the reception," he said, his tone final. Enzo stepped back, his smile never faltering. "Of course. I'll see you both there." He walked away, his shoulders relaxed, his movements unhurried. But Mariah could feel the threat lingering in the air like smoke. Corrado offered his hand, pulling her to her feet. Her legs felt weak, her head light. "What did he mean?" she whispered. "What was that?" Corrado's eyes were hard, unreadable. "It means he knows." "Knows what?" He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw something close to fear in his expression. "That you're not just my date. You're a message. And messages get people killed." Mariah's hand flew to her stomach, instinct overriding logic. "You said I'd be safe." "You will be," Corrado said, his voice fierce. "I'll protect you, even if it costs my life." The words should have comforted her. But all she felt was the weight of a trap closing around her, and the terrifying realization that she had walked into it willingly. Hit subscribe and let me keep you company with a new story every day. The reception hall glowed like a jewel box, all gold and crystal and soft amber light. Long tables stretched across polished marble floors, covered in white linen and arrangements of roses that smelled too sweet, almost sickly. A string quartet played in the corner, their music delicate and haunting. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers that looked like tiny works of art. Everyone smiled. Everyone laughed. But underneath it all, Mariah could feel the tension coiling like a snake ready to strike. Corrado kept her close, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. People greeted him with respect that bordered on fear, their eyes sliding to Mariah with barely concealed curiosity. She felt like a specimen under glass, studied and dissected with every glance. Her dress felt too tight, her shoes hurt. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, sensing her anxiety. "Relax," Corrado murmured, his lips close to her ear. "You're doing fine." But she did not feel fine. She felt like a fraud, a pawn in a game she did not understand. They reached a table near the center of the room, and Corrado pulled out a chair for her. As she sat, a woman approached, older, elegant, with steel-gray hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her dress was black and expensive, her jewelry understated but clearly worth more than Mariah's entire life. She looked at Mariah the way someone might look at a stray dog that had wandered into a fancy restaurant. "Mother," Corrado said, his tone respectful but guarded. The woman's gaze did not leave Mariah. "So this is your guest. This is Mariah Cole," Corrado said. "Mariah, my mother, Julia Bellini." Mariah forced a smile, extending her hand. It's nice to meet you. Julia looked at the offered hand for a long moment, before taking it briefly, her grip cold and limp. How far along are you? She asked, her eyes dropping to Mariah's belly. 7 months, Mariah said quietly. And the father? The question hit like a slap. Mariah's throat tightened. Corrado stepped in smoothly. Not in the picture. Julia's lips thinned. How unfortunate. She turned to Corrado, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. We need to talk. Alone. Later, Corrado said firmly. Julia's eyes flashed with irritation, but she nodded and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. Mariah exhaled slowly, her hands trembling in her lap. She hates me. She hates everyone, Corrado said, sitting beside her. Don't take it personally. Before Mariah could respond, a younger man approached, grinning wide, his suit slightly rumpled, his tie loosened. He had Corrado's dark eyes but softer features, boyish charm radiating from him like heat. Big brother, he said, clapping Corrado on the shoulder. You made it, Matteo, Corrado said, standing to embrace him. Congratulations. Matteo's gaze shifted to Mariah, and his grin widened. And you must be the mystery woman everyone's talking about. He extended his hand. Matteo Bellini, the less scary brother. Mariah took his hand, surprised by the warmth in his grip. Mariah Cole. And congratulations on your wedding. Thank you, Matteo said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Though I have to say, you're causing quite the stir. Half the room thinks you're Corrado's secret girlfriend. The other half thinks you're a hired actress. Which is it, Matteo? Corrado warned. I'm just curious, Matteo said innocently. You never bring anyone to these things. And now you show up with a beautiful pregnant woman? That's a statement, brother. Mariah felt her cheeks flush. I'm just a friend. A friend, Matteo repeated, glancing at Corrado with raised eyebrows. Sure. Well, friend or not, welcome to the family circus. Try not to get eaten alive. He winked at Mariah, then disappeared back into the crowd. Corrado sat down again, his jaw tight. He means well. Does he know? Mariah asked quietly. About Damon, about what happened. No, Corrado said, and he never will. Another man approached, this one leaner, sharper, with dark hair and a calculating gaze that reminded Mariah of a hawk. He wore a gray suit, and moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous he was. Corrado, he said, his voice smooth. Interesting choice. Raffaele, Corrado said, his tone neutral. This is Mariah. Mariah, my cousin. Raffaele Conti. Raffaele's eyes swept over Mariah, assessing her like she was a business transaction. Pleasure, he said, though his smile did not reach his eyes. He leaned closer to Corrado, his voice dropping. We need to talk. Enzo's been asking questions. Not now, Corrado said. It can't wait. Corrado's hand tightened on the armrest. 10 minutes. Raffaele nodded and walked away. Mariah's chest tightened with dread. What does he want? Nothing you need to worry about, Corrado said, but his eyes were dark, troubled. The lights dimmed slightly, and the crowd quieted as Enzo Morelli rose from his seat at the head table, a champagne glass in his hand. He smiled, warm and charming, the perfect father of the bride, but Mariah saw the edge beneath it, the cold calculation in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, Enzo began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. Thank you all for celebrating this beautiful union with us today. My daughter has found a wonderful man in Matteo Bellini. He paused, his gaze sliding to Corrado. The Bellini family has always valued loyalty, tradition, family. Another pause. I hope we can continue to honor those values. Because when we forget where we come from, when we bring in things that don't belong, his eyes locked onto Mariah, just for a heartbeat. Accidents happen. The room erupted in polite applause, but Mariah could barely breathe. Corrado's hand found hers under the table, squeezing tight. Breathe, he whispered. Don't react. But her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Enzo raised his glass higher. To loyalty, to family, to knowing who your real friends are. Everyone drank. Mariah's glass sat untouched. Corrado leaned close, his voice fierce and low. Stay with me tonight. Don't leave my side, no matter what happens. What's going to happen? She whispered. His eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there. Something dark. Something inevitable. War, he said. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes after. The music swelled, soft and romantic, as couples drifted onto the dance floor. Matteo and his bride moved together in the center, her white dress flowing like water, his hand steady at her waist. The crowd watched with champagne glasses raised and smiles that did not quite hide the whispers slithering beneath the surface. Mariah sat frozen at the table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to make herself invisible. Corrado stood and extended his hand. "Dance with me." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "I don't think that's a good idea." "It's not a request," he said quietly. "Everyone's watching. If we don't dance, they'll know something's wrong." Mariah's pulse quickened. She glanced around the room and saw faces turned toward them, eyes glittering with curiosity and judgment. Enzo Morelli sat at the head table, his gaze fixed on her like a predator watching wounded prey. She felt trapped, exposed, but Corrado's hand remained steady, waiting. She took it. He led her onto the dance floor, his grip firm but careful, aware of the fragile life she carried. When they reached the center, he placed one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, and they began to move. The music wrapped around them, slow and haunting, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. "Look at me," Corrado said softly. "Not at them, at me." Mariah forced herself to meet his eyes. They were dark, unreadable, but there was something beneath the surface, something almost human. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Really? Why bring me here? Why risk all of this?" His jaw tightened. "Because I needed to send a message." "A message," she repeated bitterly. "That's all I am to you. A prop." "No," he said, and the word came out sharper than he intended. He pulled her slightly closer, his voice dropping to a murmur only she could hear. "You're more than that, and that's the problem." Her breath caught. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, another couple swept past them. It was Raffaele, dancing with a striking woman in a red dress. As he passed, he leaned close to Corrado. "Enzo's men are positioned at every exit. He's planning something." Corrado did not break rhythm. "How many?" "6 that I can see. Maybe more outside." Mariah's stomach twisted. "What's happening?" "Nothing," Corrado said smoothly, but his hand tightened at her waist. "Just keep dancing." She tried to focus on the steps, on the music, but fear clawed at her chest. She could feel eyes on her from every direction. Julia watched from the edge of the room, her expression cold and disapproving. Matteo glanced over from where he danced with his bride, concern flickering across his face, and Enzo sat perfectly still, his fingers drumming slowly against the table, like he was counting down to something. The song ended, and polite applause rippled through the room. Corrado led Mariah back to their table, but before they could sit, a voice cut through the noise. "Corrado Bellini." Everyone turned. Enzo stood at the head table, his champagne glass raised once more. His smile was wide and friendly, but his eyes were ice. "I'd like to propose another toast. To new beginnings." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And to remembering the past, because the past has a way of catching up with us, doesn't it?" Corrado's posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Every muscle in his body went taut, ready. "Enzo," he said evenly, "this is your daughter's wedding. Let's keep it that way." Enzo's smile widened. "Of course. I'm simply making conversation. For instance, I was wondering." His gaze slid to Mariah, sharp as a blade. "Mariah, is it? Tell me, dear. What was the name of your baby's father?" The room went silent. Every eye turned to her. Mariah's heart stopped. Her mind raced, scrambling for an answer. A lie, anything. But her throat had closed up, and she could not speak. Corrado stepped forward, placing himself between her and Enzo. "That's enough. I'm just curious," Enzo said innocently. "After all, you bring a pregnant woman to a family event. People are bound to ask questions." Or, he paused, his eyes glittering with malice. "Did something happen to him?" Mariah's legs shook. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm, reminding her why she had to survive this. "He's gone," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's not part of my life anymore." "Gone," Enzo repeated thoughtfully. "How tragic. Do you know what happened to him?" "Enzo," Corrado warned, his voice deadly quiet. But Enzo was not finished. He set down his glass and walked slowly toward them, weaving through the crowd like a shark circling prey. When he reached Mariah, he stopped inches away, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she and Corrado could hear. His name was Damon Hurst, and he died 3 weeks ago in an alley, shot in the chest, left to bleed out in the rain. His eyes flicked to Corrado. "Funny coincidence, isn't it?" Mariah's vision blurred. The room tilted. She could not breathe. Enzo knew. He knew everything. Corrado moved faster than she thought possible, grabbing Enzo by the arm, his voice low and lethal. "Walk away. Now." Enzo smiled, unbothered. "Or what? You'll shoot me in front of everyone? In front of your brother's bride? In front of her?" He glanced at Mariah, then back at Corrado. "You've made a mistake, Bellini. Bringing her here, making her important. Now she's a target, and there's nothing you can do to stop what's coming." He pulled his arm free and walked back to his table, calm as ever. The music started again, as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. Mariah grabbed Corrado's sleeve, her voice shaking. He knows you killed Damon. He's going to tell everyone. He's not going to do anything," Corrado said, his voice hard. "Not here, not tonight." Then when? Corrado looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Real, raw fear. "Soon," he said, "which is why we're leaving. Now." He took her hand and started moving toward the exit, but Raffaele appeared, blocking their path. "6 men outside, 3 at the front, 3 at the back. You walk out that door, they'll follow." Corrado's jaw clenched. "Then we don't walk, we run." Mariah's heart hammered. "What about the baby? I can't." "I'll protect you," Corrado said fiercely, gripping her shoulders. "Both of you. I swear it. But you have to trust me." She stared into his eyes, searching for the truth, for the promise, for something to hold on to. And despite everything, despite the lies, the violence, the blood, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." The words felt like a death sentence, but they were all she had left. They moved through the reception hall like ghosts, slipping between clusters of guests who were too drunk or too distracted to notice the tension radiating from Corrado's body. Mariah's hand was locked in his, her pulse pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The baby kicked frantically, as if sensing the danger pressing in from all sides. Her heels clicked against the marble, too loud, too obvious, and she wanted to rip them off and run barefoot into the night. Raffaele appeared beside them, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice clipped and urgent. "Cars ready at the service entrance. 2 minutes, but we've got a problem." "What problem?" Corrado asked, his eyes scanning the room. "Enzo's men are moving. They're not waiting anymore." Corrado cursed under his breath and pulled Mariah toward a side hallway, away from the crowd. The corridor was narrow and dim, lined with doors that led to kitchens and storage rooms. Mariah stumbled, her dress catching on her heel, and Corrado caught her before she fell. "I can't do this," she gasped, one hand pressed against her belly. "I can't run. The baby." "You can," Corrado said, his voice fierce. "You will. Because the alternative is worse." Footsteps echoed behind them, heavy, deliberate. Corrado spun around, positioning himself between Mariah and whatever was coming. 2 men emerged from the shadows, broad-shouldered and cold-eyed, their hands resting casually near their waistbands where guns were hidden. They did not speak. They did not need to. Raffaele stepped forward, his tone calm but deadly. "Gentlemen, you're making a mistake." One of the men smiled. "Enzo just wants to talk to the girl. She's not going anywhere," Corrado said flatly. The man's smile widened. "Then we have a problem." Everything happened fast. Raffaele moved first, his fist connecting with the nearest man's jaw in a sickening crack. The second man reached for his gun, but Corrado was faster, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the pictures hanging there. Mariah stumbled backward, her hands flying to her stomach, terror flooding her veins. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Corrado's voice cut through the chaos. "Mariah, go, now." She did not move. She could not. Her legs were frozen, her mind blank with fear. Corrado looked back at her, his eyes blazing. "Go." Raffaele grabbed her arm and yanked her forward, pulling her down the hallway while Corrado stayed behind, holding off the 2 men. She heard grunts, the thud of bodies hitting walls, the sharp crack of bone. Then they burst through a door into a narrow stairwell, the metal steps clanging beneath their feet. Raffaele moved fast, half dragging her down the stairs, his grip bruising but necessary. "Where's Corrado?" she gasped. "He'll catch up," Raffaele said, but his voice was tight, uncertain. They reached the ground floor and pushed through another door into a back alley. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp, smelling of rain and garbage. A black car idled near the curb, engine running, headlights cutting through the darkness. Raffaele shoved her toward it. "Get in." "Not without Corrado," she said, her voice breaking. He'll be here. Get in the car. But she did not move. She could not leave him. Not after everything. Not after he had promised to protect her. She turned back toward the door just as it slammed open and Corrado stumbled out, blood streaking his knickknickles, his suit jacket torn. Relief flooded her chest, so strong it nearly knocked her over. Corrado, move, he barked, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the car. Raffaele opened the back door and practically threw her inside. Corrado slid in beside her, and Raffaele took the front passenger seat. The driver, a silent, stone-faced man Mariah had never seen, hit the gas, and the car lurched forward, tires screeching against asphalt. Mariah pressed her back against the seat, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. What just happened? Enzo's making his move, Corrado said, his voice tight. He's done playing games. He wants me dead, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Corrado's jaw clenched. He wants leverage. You're carrying a dead man's child, a man who betrayed him. That makes you a symbol. A problem. Mariah's chest tightened. You knew this would happen. You knew bringing me to that wedding would put a target on my back. I thought I could control it, Corrado said. And for the first time, his voice cracked. I was wrong. Silence filled the car. Raffaele glanced back at them, his expression grim. We need to get her somewhere safe. Somewhere Enzo can't reach. There's nowhere he can't reach, Corrado said bitterly. Then we make one, Raffaele said. Your penthouse, top floor, security cameras, armed guards. No one gets in without clearance. Corrado nodded slowly. Fine, but we don't stop moving. Not until I know every one of Enzo's men is accounted for. Mariah looked out the window, watching the city blur past in streaks of light and shadow. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything, but all she could think about was the baby, the tiny life inside her that had done nothing wrong but was already caught in a war it did not understand. Why did you really bring me to that wedding? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Corrado did not answer right away. When he finally spoke, his words were slow, measured, as if he was choosing each one carefully. Because I needed everyone to see that I'm not afraid, that I can protect what's mine. I'm not yours, she said. He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You are now, whether you like it or not. The moment you walked into that church with me, you became mine, and I don't let go of what's mine. The words should have terrified her, but instead, something warm and dangerous unfurled in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The car pulled into an underground garage, the heavy metal gate clanging shut behind them. Corrado helped her out, his hand steady at her elbow, and led her toward an elevator. Raffaele stayed behind, talking in low, urgent tones into his phone. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in silence. Mariah leaned against the wall, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. What happens now? Corrado's expression was unreadable. Now I keep you alive, no matter what it costs. The elevator doors opened onto a sleek, modern penthouse, all glass and steel and breathtaking views of the city. But Mariah did not care about the view. All she cared about was the baby moving inside her and the man standing beside her who had just made her the center of a war. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that she had crossed a line she could never uncross. The penthouse was silent, except for the hum of the city below, muffled by thick glass that separated them from the world. Mariah stood in the center of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, her navy dress wrinkled and damp with sweat. The baby kicked hard, a sharp jab beneath her ribs that made her wince. She pressed her hand against the spot, trying to calm the frantic movement, but her own heart was racing too fast to offer any comfort. Corrado moved through the space like a caged animal, checking windows, locking doors, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders in Italian. Mariah caught fragments of the conversation, names she did not recognize, threats she did not want to understand. When he finally hung up, he stood at the window, staring out at the glittering city, his shoulders tense. You should eat something, he said without turning around. I'm not hungry, Mariah said, though her stomach twisted with emptiness. You need to eat. For the baby, she almost laughed. You care about the baby now? After dragging me into a war zone? Corrado turned slowly, his eyes dark and unreadable. I've always cared. That's why you're here. I'm here because you needed a prop, she shot back, anger surging through her exhaustion. A pregnant woman on your arm to make you look strong, to send a message. You said so yourself. I also said you're more than that, Corrado said quietly. And I meant it. Mariah shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. I don't even know what that means. I don't know who you are. I don't know why I'm still here. All I know is that the father of my baby is dead, and you're the one who killed him. The words hung between them, sharp and brutal. Corrado did not flinch. He did not look away. Damon was a thief and a traitor. He stole from my family. He sold information to rivals. He put innocent people in danger. He had to die. And what about me? Mariah whispered. Did I have to see it? Did I have to carry that image in my head every time I feel my baby move? Corrado's jaw tightened. No, you didn't. And if I could take that back, I would. But you can't, she said, her voice breaking. So what do we do now? Before he could answer, the elevator chimed. Mariah's heart leapt into her throat, but Corrado moved toward it with calm precision, his hand slipping beneath his jacket where she knew a gun was hidden. The doors opened, and Raffaele stepped out, his face grim. Enzo's not backing down, Raffaele said. He's spreading word that the girl is a liability, that she knows too much, that she needs to disappear. Mariah's knees went weak. Corrado caught her arm, steadying her. How many of his men are committed? At least a dozen, Raffaele said. Maybe more. He's calling in favors, pulling soldiers from other families. Then we pull ours, Corrado said. Call everyone. I want 20 men on this building by morning. Raffaele hesitated. Corrado, if you go to war over her, the other families will see it as weakness. They'll think you're choosing a woman over the family. I don't care what they think, Corrado said, his voice cold as stone. Raffaele glanced at Mariah, then back at his cousin. You should care. Because if you lose this, you lose everything. Then I won't lose, Corrado said. Make the calls. Raffaele nodded and left. The elevator doors closing behind him with a soft hiss. Mariah sank onto the couch, her legs trembling, her hands pressed against her belly. You're starting a war for me. Why? Corrado crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers. Because you're innocent. Because your baby deserves a chance. And because I'm tired of letting men like Enzo decide who lives and who dies. But you do the same thing, Mariah said, her voice thick with tears. You kill people. You decide their fate. I know, he said quietly, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I can still choose who I protect. And I choose you. Mariah searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the trap. But all she saw was exhaustion, and something that looked dangerously like regret. I don't understand you. You don't have to, he said. You just have to trust me. A little longer. She wanted to say no. She wanted to walk away, to disappear into the night and never look back. But she had nowhere to go. No money, no safety. And deep down, beneath the fear and anger, there was something else. Something she did not want to name. Okay, she whispered. A little longer. Corrado stood and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned a few minutes later with a plate of food, bread, cheese, fruit. Simple but nourishing. He set it on the coffee table in front of her. Eat. She picked at the food, her appetite non-existent, but she forced herself to swallow a few bites. The baby settled slightly, the frantic kicking easing. Corrado sat across from her, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Anything. Do you regret it? Killing Damon? Corrado did not hesitate. No. He deserved what he got. Mariah's chest tightened. Even knowing what it did to me? His expression softened, just a fraction. That, I regret. Silence settled between them again, heavy and complicated. Mariah finished eating and set the plate aside. Her eyes felt heavy, her body exhausted from the adrenaline crash. Corrado noticed. There's a bedroom down the hall. You should rest. I don't think I can sleep, she said. Try, he said gently. I'll be right here. No one's getting through that door. Mariah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. She stood slowly, her hand braced against her lower back, and walked down the hallway. The bedroom was simple but luxurious, all clean lines and soft sheets. She kicked off her heels and lay down on the bed, still wearing her dress, too tired to change. But sleep did not come. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. She thought about Damon, about the alley, about the blood. She thought about Corrado's promise to protect her, and she thought about the terrifying realization that she was starting to believe him. In the living room, Corrado sat in the dark, his gun on the table beside him, his eyes fixed on the elevator doors. He did not move. He did not sleep. He just waited, knowing that when morning came, the war would begin in earnest. And this time, there would be no walking away. The sun rose slowly over the city, painting the penthouse windows in shades of gold and amber. Mariah woke to the sound of muffled voices, her body stiff and aching from sleeping in her dress. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The wedding, the threat, Enzo. She sat up quickly, too quickly, and a wave of dizziness forced her back against the headboard. The baby kicked, protesting the sudden movement. She stood carefully and walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed, a stranger wearing her skin. She ran her fingers through her tangled hair and tried to smooth the wrinkles from her dress, but it was useless. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman trapped in someone else's nightmare. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Corrado standing at the dining table with Raffaele and two other men she had never seen before. Maps were spread across the surface, marked with red circles and arrows. Phones buzzed constantly. Everyone spoke in low, urgent tones. Corrado looked up when she entered, his eyes sweeping over her with concern. "You should have slept longer," he said. "I can't sleep knowing people want me dead," Mariah said flatly. One of the men at the table glanced at her, then at Corrado, his expression skeptical. "This is her? This is what we're going to war over?" Corrado's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Say that again, Luca. I dare you." The man, Luca, held up his hands in surrender. "I'm just saying. Enzo has numbers, resources, and we're burning through goodwill protecting a girl who isn't even family." "She is now," Corrado said, and the finality in his voice silenced the room. Mariah's chest tightened. She moved closer to the table, looking at the maps, the circles marking buildings, warehouses, safe houses. "What is all this?" "Enzo's territory," Raffaele explained. "His men, his assets. We're planning our response." "Response," Mariah repeated numbly. "You mean attack." "Defense," Corrado corrected. "Enzo made the first move. We're making sure he doesn't get a second." Mariah's hands clenched at her sides. "People are going to die because of me." "People were always going to die," Corrado said. "Enzo's been looking for an excuse to move against us for years. You're just the spark, not the cause." The words should have comforted her. They did not. She turned away from the table, moving toward the windows, staring out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Enzo Morelli was planning her death. Somewhere down there, men were loading guns and sharpening knives, all because she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Raffaele's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "We have a problem." "What now?" Corrado asked. "Enzo's reached out to the Grimaldi family. They're considering backing him." Luca cursed under his breath. "If the Grimaldis side with Enzo, we're outnumbered 3-1. Then we make sure they don't," Corrado said. "Set up a meeting. Today." "They won't agree," Raffaele said. "Not after you brought an outsider into family business." "They'll agree," Corrado said coldly. "Because if they don't, they'll regret it." Mariah turned back to face them. "Stop! Just stop! You're talking about starting a war, about threatening families, about killing people. And for what? Me? I'm not worth this." Corrado crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders, not roughly, but firm enough that she could not look away. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." "Why not?" she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "It's true. I'm nobody. A nurse with a dead boyfriend and a baby I can barely afford. I don't belong in your world. I never did." "You belong where I say you belong," Corrado said, his voice fierce. "And right now, that's here. With me. Safe." "I'm not safe," she said, her voice breaking. "And neither is my baby. Not as long as I'm near you." The words hit him like a bullet. She saw the pain flash across his face before he locked it away behind cold resolve. "You think you'd be safer out there? Alone? With Enzo's men hunting you? You wouldn't last a day." "Maybe," she said. "But at least I'd die knowing I tried to protect my child instead of hiding behind someone else's guns." Silence fell, thick and suffocating. The other men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Raffaele cleared his throat. "We should give them a minute." The men filed toward the elevator, leaving Corrado and Mariah alone. He released her shoulders and stepped back, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You want to leave? Fine. I won't stop you. But you need to understand what you're walking into." "I understand," Mariah said, though her voice shook. "No, you don't," Corrado said, his voice raw. Enzo doesn't just want you gone. He wants to make an example of you. He wants everyone to see what happens when someone gets too close to me, when I care about something more than power." He paused, his eyes boring into hers. "He'll find you. He'll hurt you. And he'll make sure you're alive long enough to watch them cut that baby out of you." Mariah's knees buckled. She pressed her hand against the wall, bile rising in her throat. "Stop. That's what you're walking into," Corrado continued relentlessly. "That's the world you think you can survive alone. Then what do you want from me?" She screamed, tears streaming down her face. "What am I supposed to do?" "Trust me," he said, his voice breaking. "Let me protect you. Let me fix this." "You can't fix this," she sobbed. "You killed Damon. You brought me to that wedding. You made me a target. You can't just undo that." "I know," he said quietly. "But I can make sure it doesn't end with you and your baby in a grave." Mariah sank onto the couch, her whole body shaking. Corrado knelt in front of her again, his hands resting gently on her knees. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. That's all." She looked down at him, at the man who had destroyed her life and was now fighting to save it. And she realized, with a sickening clarity, that she had no choice. Not really, not if she wanted her baby to survive. "Okay," she whispered. "But if my baby gets hurt because of you, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." Corrado nodded slowly. "I already do." 3 days passed in a blur of tension and silence. Mariah stayed in the penthouse, moving between the bedroom and the living room like a ghost. Corrado's men rotated shifts, silent figures in dark suits stationed at the elevator, the stairwell, the garage. She heard whispered phone calls in Italian, saw Corrado's face grow harder with each passing hour. He barely slept, barely ate. He was a man preparing for war. On the 4th morning, Mariah woke to find the penthouse quieter than usual. She dressed in the clothes Corrado's people had brought her, simple jeans and a soft sweater that stretched over her belly, and ventured into the living room. Corrado stood at the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly. "I need to go out," he said. "Just for an hour. Raffaele will stay with you." Mariah's stomach twisted. "Where are you going?" "To handle something." "That's not an answer." Corrado crossed the room, stopping in front of her. "The less you know, the safer you are." "I'm already in danger," she said. "You can't protect me by keeping me in the dark." His eyes searched hers, weighing options. "I'm meeting with someone who has information about Enzo's next move. If I can get ahead of it, I can end this before it gets worse." "Or you could walk into a trap," Mariah said, fear lacing her voice. "I've walked into worse," he said quietly. He reached out, his hand hesitating before gently touching her shoulder. "I'll be back, I promise." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the elevator with 2 of his men. The doors closed, and silence swallowed the penthouse. Mariah stood frozen, one hand pressed against her belly, feeling the baby shift restlessly inside her. Raffaele emerged from the hallway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one, decaf. For the baby, she took it, grateful for something to hold. "He's going to get himself killed, isn't he?" "Corrado survived worse than Enzo Morelli," Raffaele said. "He'll be fine." "You don't sound convinced." Raffaele's expression darkened. "I'm never convinced when family is involved. Emotions make people reckless, and Corrado's been reckless since the moment he met you." Mariah's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Raffaele said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "But you're here now, and whether you like it or not, you matter to him. More than you should." "What does that mean?" Raffaele studied her for a long moment. "It means he's willing to lose everything to keep you safe. And in our world, that's the most dangerous thing a man can do." Before Mariah could respond, her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, frowning at the unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, smooth and cold. "Mariah Cole." Her blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "I think you know," Enzo Morelli said. Mariah's hand shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Raffaele was at her side instantly, his eyes sharp. "Hang up," he mouthed, but she could not move. Enzo continued, his voice calm, almost friendly. "I wanted to have a conversation, just you and me, without Corrado's interference." "I have nothing to say to you," Mariah said, her voice trembling. "That's a shame," Enzo said. Because I have something that might interest you. Information about the night Damon died. Details Corrado hasn't told you. Mariah's breath caught. What details? Meet me, and I'll tell you everything. I'm not meeting you, she said, her voice rising. You want me dead. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, Enzo said, echoing Corrado's words from days ago. I want to talk. 1 hour. In public. A church. St. Augustine's on 5th Street. Come alone. Or don't come at all. Why would I trust you? Because you don't trust Corrado, Enzo said simply. Not fully. Not after what he's done. And you deserve the truth, Mariah. For your baby's sake. The line went dead. Mariah stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind spinning. Raffaele grabbed her arm. What did he say? He wants to meet, she whispered. He says he has information about Damon. About that night. It's a trap, Raffaele said immediately. He's baiting you. But what if it's not? Mariah said, her voice desperate. What if there's something Corrado hasn't told me? Something I need to know? There's nothing Enzo can tell you that's worth your life, Raffaele said firmly, but doubt had already taken root. Mariah thought about the alley, the blood, the way Corrado had looked at her when she asked if he regretted killing Damon. She thought about the secrets, the half-truths, the feeling that she was living in a story where everyone knew the ending except her. I need to know, she said quietly. Mariah, I need to know, she repeated, her voice breaking. For my baby, I need to understand what I'm protecting them from. Raffaele cursed under his breath. If you go, I'm coming with you, he said alone. Then you're not going. Mariah looked at him, at the man who had helped drag her into this nightmare, who had stood guard over her for days, who looked at her now with something close to understanding. If Corrado were here, what would he say? He'd say absolutely not, Raffaele said without hesitation. He'd lock you in that bedroom if he had to. Then I'm glad he's not here, Mariah said. She grabbed her coat and moved toward the elevator. Raffaele blocked her path, his expression torn between duty and sympathy. You're making a mistake. Maybe, she said. But it's my mistake to make. For a long moment they stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Then Raffaele's shoulders sagged. Fine, but I'm calling Corrado, and I'm following you. You won't see me, but I'll be there. Mariah nodded, relief and terror warring in her chest. Thank you. She stepped into the elevator, her hand pressed protectively over her belly. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Raffaele, his phone already at his ear, his face grim. The elevator descended, carrying her toward a choice she could not take back. Outside, the city waited, cold and unforgiving, and somewhere in a church on 5th Street, Enzo Morelli was waiting too, holding secrets that could either save her or destroy her. Mariah closed her eyes and prayed she was not walking toward her own grave. St. Augustine's church sat on a quiet corner, its stone facade weathered by decades of rain and wind. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across empty pews. Mariah pushed through the heavy wooden doors, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The smell hit her immediately. Incense, old wood, candle wax. It reminded her of the wedding, of standing beside Corrado, while death circled them like a hungry wolf. She moved slowly down the center aisle. One hand braced against the pews for support, the other pressed against her belly. The baby was restless, kicking and turning as if sensing her fear. Her footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, too loud, too obvious. She wanted to turn around and run, but her legs kept moving forward. Enzo Morelli sat in the front pew, his hands folded in his lap, his head slightly bowed as if in prayer. He did not turn when she approached, did not acknowledge her presence until she was standing just a few feet away. Thank you for coming, he said quietly, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Mariah did not sit. Say what you came to say. Then I'm leaving. Enzo finally looked at her, his eyes cold and assessing. You're brave. I'll give you that. Stupid, but brave. I didn't come here for insults. No, Enzo agreed. You came for the truth. He gestured to the pew beside him. Sit, please, for the baby's sake. Mariah hesitated, then lowered herself onto the wooden bench, keeping as much distance between them as possible. Enzo studied her profile, his expression unreadable. How much has Corrado told you about that night? About Damon? Enough, Mariah said, though her voice wavered. He told you Damon was a thief, a traitor, that he had to die. Yes. Did he tell you why Damon stole from him? Mariah's chest tightened. No, Enzo smiled. A thin, cruel curve of his lips. Damon owed money, a lot of it, to me. He got in over his head with gambling debts, borrowed from the wrong people, and when he couldn't pay, I offered him a deal. Steal from the Bellinis, feed me information, and I'd wipe his slate clean. Mariah's stomach churned. You're lying. Am I? Enzo pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and handed it to her. Look for yourself. With trembling hands, Mariah unfolded the paper. It was a contract, signed by Damon, detailing amounts owed, dates, payments missed. At the bottom, a single line, debt forgiven upon completion of services rendered to Enzo Morelli. Her vision blurred. He did it for money. He betrayed Corrado because of you. He did it to survive, Enzo corrected. To provide for you and that baby. He wasn't a good man, Mariah, but he was trying. Tears burned down her cheeks. She crumpled the paper in her fist. Why are you telling me this? Because Corrado didn't just kill a traitor, Enzo said softly. He killed the father of your child. A man who was trying to escape a trap I set. And now he's keeping you close. Not to protect you, but to control you. To make sure you don't become a problem. That's not true, Mariah whispered, but doubt clawed at her chest. Enzo leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Ask yourself this. If Corrado really cared about you, why hasn't he told you the whole story? Why hasn't he explained that Damon was working for me under duress? Why hasn't he admitted that he killed a desperate man trying to save his family? Mariah's breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her mind spun, trying to separate truth from manipulation. You're trying to turn me against him. I'm trying to save your life, Enzo said. Corrado Bellini is a dangerous man. He destroys everything he touches. And you, Mariah, are next. Then why not just kill me? She demanded, anger flaring through the tears. Why play these games? Because you're not my enemy, Enzo said. You're a victim, just like Damon, and I'm offering you a way out. What way out? Enzo reached into his jacket again and pulled out an envelope. He set it on the pew between them. $50,000. Cash. A new identity. A safe house in another state. All you have to do is walk away. Leave Corrado. Disappear. Raise your baby far from this world. Mariah stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. And in return? Nothing, Enzo said. Just your silence. Your absence. That's all I need. You expect me to believe you'd just let me go? After everything? Enzo's expression softened, almost convincing. I'm a father, Mariah. I have daughters, grandchildren. I don't want your blood on my hands. I want you gone. That's all. Mariah's hand hovered over the envelope. $50,000, a new life, safety. Everything she had wanted from Corrado, now offered by his enemy. But something felt wrong. Poisoned. What happens to Corrado if I leave? She asked. Enzo's smile returned. That's not your concern anymore. It is if you're planning to kill him. Corrado's fate was sealed the moment he chose you over his family, Enzo said. Whether you stay or go, that doesn't change. Mariah stood abruptly, the pew scraping against stone. I'm not choosing sides in your war. You already did, Enzo said calmly. The moment you walked into that wedding on his arm, the moment you let him pull you into his bed, the moment you started believing his lies. I haven't. Mariah's voice broke. I don't believe him. Then take the money, Enzo said, rising to his feet. Save yourself. Save your baby. Before it's too late. Mariah looked at the envelope, then at Enzo, then at the stained glass windows casting bloody light across the altar. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she could not tell if she should run toward Corrado or away from him. I need time, she whispered. You don't have time, Enzo said. Corrado's coming. Right now. Raffaele called him the moment you left. He'll be here in minutes. And when he arrives, this offer disappears. Panic flooded her veins. You said I could come alone. You did, Enzo said. But Raffaele didn't trust you to stay safe. Smart man. He gestured toward a side door. That door leads to an alley. A car is waiting. If you want out, go now. Mariah's mind raced. She thought about Corrado's promises, his lies, his violence. She thought about Damon bleeding out in the rain. She thought about the baby growing inside her, innocent and fragile. And she thought about the terrifying possibility that Enzo was telling the truth. She grabbed the envelope. Enzo smiled. Good choice. But before she could move toward the door, it slammed open. Corrado burst through, his gun drawn, his face twisted with fury and fear. His eyes found hers across the church, and something shattered in his expression. Mariah, get away from him, Corrado said, his voice deadly calm. Enzo raised his hand slowly, still smiling. She came to me, Corrado. I didn't force her. Shut up, Corrado snarled. He looked at Mariah, and she saw the betrayal in his eyes, raw and bleeding. What did he tell you? Mariah clutched the envelope to her chest, tears streaming down her face. The truth. About Damon. About you. Corrado's gun lowered slightly, but his finger stayed on the trigger. Whatever he said, it's a lie. Is it? Mariah demanded. Did Damon steal from you because Enzo forced him to? Corrado's jaw clenched. Silence stretched, unbearable. Answer me, she screamed. Yes, Corrado said finally, the word torn from his throat. Yes, he was working for Enzo. I knew. And I killed him anyway. The world tilted. Mariah stumbled backward, her hand flying to the pew for support. You knew. You knew he was desperate, and you killed him anyway. He betrayed me, Corrado said, his voice breaking. He put innocent people at risk. I had no choice. You always have a choice, Mariah whispered. Enzo's voice cut through the tension. Now you see who he really is. Corrado's gun snapped back up, aimed directly at Enzo's head. Say one more word, and I'll paint these walls with your brain. Do it, Enzo said calmly. Pull that trigger in a church while she watches. Show her exactly what kind of man you are. Mariah looked between them, two predators circling, using her as bait. And she realized, with sickening clarity, that neither of them cared about her. Not really. She was just a piece on their board. I'm leaving, she said quietly. Both men turned to her. You're not going anywhere, Corrado said. You can't stop me, Mariah said, her voice steady despite the tears. Not anymore. She walked toward the side door, clutching the envelope, her heart breaking with every step. Behind her, she heard Corrado's voice, desperate and raw. Mariah, please, don't do this. She stopped at the door, her hand on the handle. You should have told me the truth from the beginning. Maybe then I would have stayed. Then she pushed through the door into the alley, into the cold afternoon air, and ran toward the waiting car. The car was black and sleek, engine running, a driver she did not recognize behind the wheel. Mariah stumbled toward it, the envelope clutched against her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, she heard shouting Corrado's voice, raw and desperate, calling her name. She did not look back, could not look back. If she did, she would break. The driver leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. Get in. Mariah hesitated, one hand on the doorframe, the other pressed against her belly. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting, as if knowing this was wrong. But what choice did she have? Stay with Corrado, the man who had lied to her, who had killed Damon knowing he was desperate and trapped. Or trust Enzo, a man who wanted to use her as leverage in a war she did not understand. Neither option felt like survival. Both felt like slow death. She climbed into the car. The driver pulled away from the curb, tires squealing against asphalt. Mariah twisted in her seat, looking back through the rear window. Corrado burst out of the church, his gun still in his hand, his face a mask of fury and anguish. Their eyes met for one terrible moment. Then the car turned a corner, and he disappeared. Mariah faced forward, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You okay? No, she whispered. He did not respond, just kept driving, weaving through traffic, heading toward the outskirts of the city. Mariah stared at the envelope in her lap, then slowly opened it. Cash. Stacks of bills, crisp and clean. $50,000. A new life. She should have felt relief, hope. Instead, all she felt was hollow. They drove for 20 minutes before the driver pulled into an abandoned warehouse district. Empty buildings loomed on either side, their windows shattered, their walls covered in graffiti. Mariah's stomach twisted. Where are we? Safe house, the driver said. Mr. Morelli's orders. This doesn't look safe, Mariah said, panic rising. The driver stopped the car in front of a large warehouse with rusted metal doors. Wait here. He got out and walked toward the building. Mariah watched him go, every instinct screaming at her to run. But before she could move, the warehouse doors opened, and Enzo emerged, flanked by 4 armed men. He smiled when he saw her sitting in the car. Mariah's blood turned to ice. This was not a safe house. This was a trap. She tried to open the door, but the locks clicked shut. Child safety locks. She was trapped. Enzo approached slowly, his smile widening with each step. He tapped on the window. Come out, Mariah. Let's talk. You lied, she said through the glass, her voice shaking. You said you'd let me go. I said I'd give you a way out, Enzo corrected. I never said where that way led. Mariah's heart hammered. She looked around desperately for an escape, but the men surrounded the car, their hands resting on their guns. She was outnumbered, pregnant, and alone, exactly where Enzo wanted her. The driver opened her door from the outside. Please don't make this difficult. Mariah pressed herself against the opposite door. Don't touch me. We won't, Enzo said calmly. As long as you cooperate. Come inside. We have some business to finish. What business? Mariah demanded, though she already knew. Corrado's on his way, Enzo said. And when he arrives, you're going to help me end this war. I won't, Mariah said, her voice breaking. I won't be part of this. You already are, Enzo said. The moment you took my money, the moment you walked out on Corrado. You chose a side, Mariah. Now live with it. Two of the men reached into the car and pulled her out, not roughly, but firmly enough that resistance was useless. Mariah stumbled, her legs weak, and one of them caught her arm, steadying her. They led her into the warehouse, and the doors slammed shut behind her. Inside, the space was vast and empty, lit by a few hanging bulbs that cast harsh shadows. In the center of the floor sat two chairs facing each other, and between them, a small table. Enzo gestured toward one of the chairs. Sit. Mariah did not move. What are you going to do to me? Nothing, Enzo said. If Corrado does what he's told, and if he doesn't, Enzo's smile faded. Then you and your baby become collateral damage, a necessary sacrifice to prove a point. Mariah's knees buckled. One of the men caught her and forced her into the chair. She pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the baby kick frantically, sensing her terror. Please, she whispered. My baby didn't do anything. Let me go. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I believe you, Enzo said. But Corrado won't. He'll chase you to the ends of the earth. And as long as he cares about you, you're valuable. Which means you're staying right here. Footsteps echoed outside. Voices, shouting. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, and Corrado stormed through, flanked by Raffaele and a dozen armed men. His eyes found Mariah immediately, and the relief that flashed across his face was so raw it hurt to look at. Let her go, Corrado said, his voice deadly calm. Enzo stood behind Mariah's chair, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Put down your weapons first. Not a chance, Corrado said. Then we have a problem, Enzo said. He pulled a gun from his jacket and pressed it against Mariah's temple. Mariah gasped, her whole body going rigid. The cold metal bit into her skin, and she felt the baby twist violently inside her, as if trying to escape. Corrado's face went white. Don't. Drop your guns, Enzo repeated. All of you. Or I pull this trigger and you watch her die. Corrado's hand shook. For the first time, Mariah saw him break, saw the control slip, saw the fear take over. Slowly, he lowered his gun and set it on the floor. Raffaele and the others followed, weapons clattering against concrete. Enzo smiled. Good. Now kick them away. They did. Unarmed now, vulnerable. Enzo's men moved forward, surrounding them, guns trained on every target. Mariah's breath came in short, panicked bursts. Corrado. It's okay, Corrado said, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. You're going to be okay. How touching, Enzo said, but we both know that's a lie. He looked at Corrado. You've been a thorn in my side for years, always thinking you're smarter, stronger, better, but you're not. You're weak. And this woman proved it. Let her go, Corrado said again. This is between us. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it, Enzo said. She's your weakness, your soft spot, and weaknesses get exploited. He cocked the gun. Mariah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed protectively over her belly. She thought about the baby, about the life she would never get to live, about Corrado's promises and lies and the way he had looked at her in the church, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Wait, Corrado said, his voice breaking. I'll give you whatever you want. Territory, money, my life. Just let her go. Enzo paused. Your life? Yes, Corrado said. Me for her, right now. Let her walk out, and you can do whatever you want to me. Mariah's eyes flew open. No, Corrado, no. Quiet, Enzo said, pressing the gun harder against her skull. He studied Corrado, weighing the offer. You'd die for her? A woman you barely know? Yes, Corrado said without hesitation. Enzo laughed. You really are a fool. He lowered the gun slightly, and Mariah gasped in relief. But then Enzo aimed it at Corrado instead. Unfortunately for you, I don't make deals with dead men. The gunshot split the air, but it did not come from Enzo's gun. Mariah screamed as Enzo stumbled backward, blood blooming across his shoulder. Raffaele stood behind him, a backup weapon in his hand, smoke curling from the barrel. Chaos erupted. Corrado dove for his gun. Enzo's men opened fire. Mariah threw herself out of the chair, crawling toward cover as bullets tore through the air. Strong hands grabbed her, pulling her behind a stack of crates. She looked up and saw Corrado, his face streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes wild. Stay down, he ordered. You came for me, she gasped. I'll always come for you, he said. Then he stood and fired back into the chaos, protecting her with his body, his gun, his life. And Mariah realized, with terrifying clarity, that she loved him. Even after everything, even after the lies, she loved him. The gunfire was deafening, echoing off concrete walls and metal beams. Mariah pressed herself against the crates, her hands covering her ears, her body curled protectively around her belly. The baby kicked frantically, tiny fists and feet drumming against her from the inside, and she whispered broken promises she did not know if she could keep. It's okay. We're okay. I won't let anything happen to you. But she was lying. She had no control here, no power, just hope and prayer and the man standing between her and death. Corrado moved like a force of nature, firing with deadly precision, his body a shield between her and Enzo's men. Raffaele fought beside him, methodical and brutal, dropping targets with cold efficiency. Bodies fell, blood pooled on the concrete. The air smelled like gunpowder and copper and fear. Enzo staggered behind a pillar, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with rage. Kill them all, he roared. No survivors. More gunfire erupted. A bullet whizzed past Corrado's head, so close Mariah saw his hair move. She screamed his name, but the sound was swallowed by the chaos. He glanced back at her for just a second, and in that second, she saw everything he had never said. The regret, the fear, the desperate, consuming need to keep her alive. Then he turned back to the fight. One of Enzo's men broke through the line, charging toward Mariah's hiding spot. She scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The man raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. Corrado tackled him from the side, slamming him into the ground. They struggled, fists flying, the gun skittering across the floor. Corrado's hands found the man's throat and squeezed. The man thrashed, gasping, clawing at Corrado's face. But Corrado did not let go, did not stop. Not until the man went still. Corrado stood slowly, breathing hard, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. He looked at Mariah, his expression raw. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Good, he said. Stay down. But before he could turn back, Enzo emerged from behind the pillar, his gun aimed directly at Corrado's back. Mariah saw it before anyone else, saw the cold calculation in Enzo's eyes, the way his finger curled around the trigger. Time slowed to a crawl. Corrado! She screamed. He spun, but he was too slow. Enzo fired. Mariah moved without thinking. She threw herself forward, her body colliding with Corrado's, shoving him to the side. The bullet meant for his heart tore through the air and buried itself in her shoulder instead. Pain exploded, white-hot and all-consuming. She collapsed, gasping, her vision blurring. The warehouse tilted and spun. She heard Corrado roar her name, felt his hands on her face, her shoulders, pressing against the wound. Warm blood poured between his fingers. No, 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 he chanted, his voice breaking. Mariah, stay with me. Look at me. She tried to focus on his face, but everything was fading. The baby kicked weakly, and she pressed her hand against her belly, terrified that the bullet had gone deeper, that she had failed to protect the one thing that mattered. The baby, she gasped. Is the baby? The baby's fine, Corrado said, though his voice shook. You're fine. You're going to be fine. More gunfire. Raffaele and the remaining men pushed forward, overwhelming Enzo's forces. Enzo himself stumbled backward, his gun empty, his shoulder bleeding, his face pale with shock. Raffaele leveled his weapon at Enzo's chest. Don't, Corrado said, his voice hoarse. Not yet. Raffaele hesitated, then lowered the gun slightly. Corrado stood, lifting Mariah carefully in his arms. She cried out as pain lanced through her shoulder, but he held her close, his grip steady despite the trembling in his hands. He walked toward Enzo, each step deliberate, until they stood face to face. Enzo looked at Mariah, then at Corrado, and something shifted in his expression. Fear, maybe. Or understanding. She took a bullet for you, Enzo said, his voice weak. A woman you've known for weeks. She could have let you die, but she didn't, Corrado said quietly. Because she's better than both of us. Enzo laughed bitterly, blood staining his teeth. You think this changes anything? You think love makes you strong? It makes you weak. It makes you alive, Corrado interrupted. It makes me alive. He looked down at Mariah, her face pale, her breathing shallow, and his voice dropped to a whisper. And I'd rather die alive than live empty. He turned to Raffaele. Call an ambulance. Now. What about him? Raffaele asked, gesturing to Enzo. Corrado looked back at Enzo, his eyes cold. He's done. His men are dead or scattered, his power's broken. Let him live with that. He paused. But if he ever comes near her again, I'll kill him myself. Enzo said nothing, just slumped against the pillar, defeated. Corrado carried Mariah toward the warehouse doors, Raffaele and the others forming a protective circle around them. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Corrado laid her gently on the ground, his hands pressing against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay with me, he whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. Please, I can't lose you. Mariah's vision flickered. She tried to speak, but the words would not come. Her hand found his, their fingers tangling together, slick with blood. I love you, Corrado said, the words torn from somewhere deep and broken. I know I don't deserve to. I know I've lied and hurt you and dragged you into hell. But I love you, and I need you to stay. Mariah's lips moved. A whisper, barely audible. I love you too. His breath hitched. Tears streaked through the dirt and blood on his face. Then fight. Fight for me. For us. For that baby. She nodded weakly, her hand tightening around his. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed across the warehouse walls. Paramedics rushed toward them, shouting instructions, pulling Corrado back so they could work. He did not let go of her hand. Not even when they loaded her onto the stretcher. Not even when they wheeled her toward the ambulance. He climbed in beside her, ignoring the protests, his eyes never leaving her face. As the ambulance sped through the city, Mariah drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard voices, doctors, nurses, Corrado's desperate pleas. She felt the baby move, still alive, still fighting, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and fear, she felt something else. Hope. The ambulance arrived at the hospital. They rushed her into surgery. Corrado paced the hallway outside, his hands still stained with her blood, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Raffaele appeared beside him, silent and steady. She's strong, Raffaele said quietly. She'll make it. She has to, Corrado said, his voice raw. I can't do this without her. Hours passed. The sun set, casting the hospital in shades of orange and purple. Finally, a doctor emerged, exhausted but smiling. She's stable, the doctor said. The bullet missed all vital organs. She'll need time to recover, but she and the baby are going to be fine. Corrado's legs nearly gave out. Raffaele caught him, steadying him. Can I see her? She's sleeping, the doctor said. But yes, room 304. Corrado walked down the hallway on unsteady legs, his heart pounding. He pushed open the door to her room and found her lying in the hospital bed, pale but breathing, her hand resting on her belly. An IV dripped into her arm. Monitors beeped softly. He pulled a chair beside the bed and took her hand, pressing it to his lips. I'm here, he whispered. And I'm not going anywhere. Mariah's eyes fluttered open, just barely. She looked at him, and a small, tired smile touched her lips. You kept your promise. Always, he said. She closed her eyes again, drifting back to sleep, and Corrado sat beside her, holding her hand, watching over her and the life growing inside her, knowing that everything had changed. The war was over. But their story was just beginning. 6 weeks later, the safe house sat quiet under a pale winter sky. It was small, modest, nothing like Corrado's penthouse or the grand estates of the Mafia families. Just a 2-story house on the edge of a sleepy town, surrounded by bare trees and silence. No guards, no guns visible, just peace, fragile and new. Inside, Mariah moved slowly through the kitchen, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other cradling her enormous belly. 9 months now. Any day, the doctors had said. She felt the weight of the baby pressing down, felt the constant ache in her hips and spine, felt the restless kicks that came at all hours. But she also felt something else. Safety. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Corrado sat at the small dining table, his laptop open, his phone beside him. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, no suit, no armor. His knuckles were scarred but healed. The cut above his eye had faded to a thin white line. He looked different here, softer, almost normal. He glanced up when she entered. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for 6 weeks," Mariah said, lowering herself carefully into the chair across from him. "I'm going crazy." A smile tugged at his lips. "The doctor said." "I know what the doctor said," she interrupted gently. "But the baby's fine. I'm fine. And if I lie in that bed one more minute, I'll lose my mind." Corrado closed his laptop and reached across the table, taking her hand. His thumb traced circles over her knuckles, a gesture that had become habit. "You scared me. In that warehouse. When you took that bullet, you would have done the same for me," she said quietly. "That's different." "Why? Because you're the big bad mafia boss and I'm just the pregnant nurse?" His expression darkened. "Because I've lived this life. I chose it. You didn't. You shouldn't have had to." "I chose you," Mariah said, cutting him off. "In that moment, I chose you. And I'd do it again." Corrado's throat worked. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her scarred knuckles, the place where IV needles had left marks. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me now." He laughed softly, and the sound filled the kitchen with warmth. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just holding hands, feeling the life between them shift and kick. "What were you working on?" Mariah asked, nodding toward the laptop. Corrado hesitated. "Tying up loose ends. Enzo's in prison. Federal charges. He won't see daylight for 20 years. Raffaele's managing the family business, keeping things stable. And you?" "I'm here," he said simply. "With you. For how long?" The question hung heavy. Corrado's jaw tightened. "As long as you'll have me." "That's not an answer," Mariah said. "You can't just walk away from that life, from your family, from everything you built." "I can try," he said. "I am trying. For you. For the baby." Mariah's chest tightened. "And what happens when they need you? When something goes wrong? When someone threatens the family and only you can fix it?" "Then Raffaele fixes it," Corrado said. "I'm done, Mariah. I'm out." "Are you?" she asked softly. "Or are you just hiding?" The words hit him like a blow. He pulled his hand back, standing abruptly. "I'm not hiding. I'm protecting you." "By lying to yourself?" Mariah stood too, moving around the table despite the protest in her back. "Corrado, I love you. I do. But you can't just pretend to be someone you're not. That world is part of you. And if you try to cut it out completely, it'll destroy you. It'll destroy us." "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm saying we need a new code," Mariah said, echoing the words from months ago. "Not your old one. Not complete isolation. Something in between. Something that lets you be who you are without dragging us into war." Corrado stared at her, his expression torn. "I don't know if that's possible." "Then we figure it out," she said, "together." Before he could respond, Mariah gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Her face went pale. "Corrado." "What? What's wrong?" "I think," she gasped again, doubling over. Warm liquid streamed down her legs, soaking through her pants. "My water just broke." For one frozen second, Corrado just stared. Then panic flooded his face. "Now? Right now?" "Yes, now," Mariah cried, gripping the table as a contraction ripped through her. "Oh God, it hurts." Corrado moved fast, grabbing his keys, his phone, wrapping his arm around her waist. Okay. Hospital. We're going to the hospital." "There's no time," Mariah gasped. "It's coming. The baby's coming now." Corrado's face went white. No, we planned this." "Hospital. Doctors. We have time." Another contraction hit, and Mariah screamed, her knees buckling. Corrado caught her, lowering her carefully to the floor. Her breathing came in short, frantic bursts. "Call someone. Call an ambulance. Call." "I'm calling," Corrado said, his hands shaking as he dialed. But even as he spoke to the dispatcher, he could see the truth. The ambulance would not make it in time. He hung up and knelt beside her, his face pale but determined. Okay, I've got you. Just breathe. Focus on me." I can't do this, Mariah sobbed. I'm not ready. I can't. You can, Corrado said fiercely, gripping her hand. You're the strongest person I know. You took a bullet. You survived a war. You can do this. Mariah squeezed his hand so hard she thought she might break his fingers. Another contraction tore through her, and she screamed, her whole body trembling. Corrado talked her through it, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes, his hands gentle as he helped her position herself. Minutes felt like hours. Pain consumed everything. But through it all, Corrado stayed, held her, whispered promises and encouragement. And when the baby finally came, slipping into his shaking hands with a sharp, angry cry, Mariah collapsed back against the floor, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Corrado stared down at the tiny, wriggling life in his hands, his face streaked with tears. It's a girl, he whispered, his voice breaking. Mariah, we have a daughter. Mariah reached out, and Corrado carefully placed the baby on her chest. The infant was small and red and perfect, her cries filling the quiet house with life. Mariah pressed her lips to the baby's head, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby. Hi. I'm your mama. Corrado covered them both with a blanket, his hands still shaking, his eyes never leaving them. The ambulance arrived minutes later, paramedics rushing in to check vitals, cut the cord, make sure mother and baby were stable. But Mariah barely noticed. All she could see was her daughter. All she could feel was Corrado's hand in hers. At the hospital later, after they had been cleaned up and checked over, after the chaos had settled into quiet relief, Corrado sat beside Mariah's bed, holding their daughter. He looked down at the sleeping infant, his expression full of wonder and terror. What do we name her? He asked softly. Mariah smiled, exhausted but content. Something strong, something that means hope. Corrado thought for a moment. Lucia. It means light. Mariah's smile widened. Lucia Bellini. Lucia Cole Bellini, Corrado corrected. She gets both of us. Mariah's eyes filled with tears. Both of us. Corrado leaned down and kissed her forehead, then the baby's. I meant what I said. I'm building a new life, a new code, one where she grows up safe, where you're happy, where I'm not the monster anymore. You were never the monster, Mariah whispered. You were just a man trying to survive. Now you get to be a father, a partner, something better. Corrado looked at her, at the woman who had saved his life in more ways than one, and nodded. Something better. Outside the window, the sun rose, casting golden light across the hospital room, and in that light, 3 lives broken, scarred, but still beating began again. Thank you so much for sticking around and showing me so much love and support. You have no idea how much it means to me. If this story resonated with you, then hit that subscribe and like button right now. Let's prove my daughter wrong.